The squeak of sneakers on polished wood echoed through Riverside Community Center's gymnasium as Coach Coach Brennan blew his whistle 3 times. Sharp, commanding, the sound that meant business. "Circle up, gentlemen! Center court, now!" 11 boys in mismatched practice gear jogged toward the painted logo, their voices trailing off as they formed a loose semicircle. Darian Hughes settled into his usual spot at the edge, clutching a poster board against his chest. His fingers had left small sweat marks on the white border during the walk from school. Coach Brennan stood with his hands on his hips, whistle glinting under the fluorescent lights. His Riverside basketball polo stretched tight across his shoulders, the logo crisp and proud. "Before we run drills, we're doing something different today. Character building." He smiled, the kind adults use when they think they're being relatable. "Mrs. Patterson tells me you all did family tree projects for social studies. I want to hear about them. Real talk about where you come from, who you are." He pointed to Marcus Chen, the point guard. "Marcus, start us off." Marcus held up his poster, a careful arrangement of family photos and handwritten facts. "My grandparents came from Taiwan in 1982. My grandfather worked as an engineer, and my grandmother opened a restaurant. They taught my parents about hard work and—" "Excellent!" Coach Brennan nodded approvingly. "See that, guys? Specific details. Real history. That's what I'm talking about." 3 more boys shared. Coach praised each one, asking follow-up questions about immigration stories, military service, family businesses. The gym felt warm, almost intimate, like they were all part of something bigger than basketball. "Darian," Coach Brennan gestured toward him, "let's hear yours." Darian stepped forward, turning the poster board around. He'd spent hours on it, arranging everything perfectly. The centerpiece was a photograph he'd printed at the library. His mother mid-stride on a track, lean and powerful, USA across her chest. Around it, he'd glued facts written in his careful handwriting. London 2012, women's 400-meter hurdles, gold medal, personal best, 52.34 seconds. "My mom is Lanessa Hughes," Darian said, his voice steady but quiet. "She won Olympic gold in track and field. She competed in London and—" The laugh cut through the gymnasium like a knife. Coach Brennan's head tilted back, a genuine bark of disbelief that bounced off the concrete walls. Several boys flinched. Darian's words died in his throat. "Olympic gold medalist?" Coach Brennan shook his head, still chuckling. "Come on, Darian, seriously?" Heat flooded Darian's face. "It's true. She—" "Listen, I appreciate creativity, but we're doing real family history here." Coach Brennan stepped closer, his smile fading into something harder. "Olympic athletes? Those people live in big houses. They drive nice cars. They do commercials and speaking tours." He gestured vaguely toward the parking lot. "They don't drive 2007 Hondas with dented bumpers. They show up to their kids' games." The words landed like punches. Darian felt his teammates' eyes on him, felt them calculating, remembering. His mother had never been to a game. She worked late shifts at the rehab clinic, picked up weekend hours, came home exhausted in scrubs that smelled like antiseptic. "My mom works as a physical therapist," Darian said, his voice smaller now. "She helps people recover from injuries." "She's busy, but—" "Right," Coach Brennan crossed his arms. "And let me guess, she just happens to keep her Olympic gold medal hidden away? Doesn't talk about it? Doesn't have it displayed anywhere?" "She keeps it in a safe. She doesn't like—" "Darian!" The coach's voice dropped, disappointed now instead of amused. "I've been coaching kids for 8 years. You know what I've learned? Kids who need attention will say anything, make up stories, create fantasies." He reached for the poster board. "I get it. Maybe things are hard at home. Maybe you wish your mom was more present. But lying isn't the answer." "I'm not lying." Darian pulled the poster back protective. "She really—" Coach Brennan grabbed the poster firmly. "We don't reward lies in this program." The first tear came clean and sharp, right down the middle. The sound echoed, a violent rip that seemed louder than it should have been. Darian's mother's face split in half, her stride broken. "Coach, wait!" Terrence stepped forward, but his voice was uncertain. The second tier, quarters now. The facts Darian had written so carefully became fragments. London 2012, women's, 400 meter, gold med. The third and fourth tiers came quickly, methodically. Coach Brennan's jaw was set, his movements deliberate. This was a lesson. This was teaching. The pieces fluttered down like wounded birds, landing on Darian's sneakers, the worn Nikes his mother had bought him at the outlet store, the ones he'd been so grateful for because they were almost new. Almost the right brand. The gym was silent, except for the distant hum of the ventilation system. Darian stood frozen, staring down at the scattered pieces. A fragment with his mother's hand reaching, another with part of the Olympic rings, another with just 2 letters, S.A. His throat was tight, his eyes burned, but he wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them. Coach Brennan wiped his hands together, a gesture of finality. Let that be a lesson to everyone. Integrity matters, truth matters. When you lie to get attention, there are consequences. He turned away, heading toward the equipment closet. All right, let's run suicides. Line up. The boys scattered to the baseline, their movements hushed and awkward. Darian didn't move. He stood at center court, the torn pieces of his family tree scattered around his feet like evidence of something he couldn't name. His teammates jogged past him, avoiding his eyes, their silence louder than any accusation. Terrence glanced back once, his expression conflicted, then looked away. The morning light came soft through the thin curtains of apartment 3B, filtering across furniture that was worn but cared for. Darian sat at their small kitchen table, adding the final touches to his poster board with a blue marker. The apartment smelled like eggs and toast, like every Thursday morning, like home. "Baby, you want cheese in these?" Lanessa stood at the stove in her navy scrubs, the ones with her name embroidered over the pocket. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she moved with the efficient grace of someone who'd learned to do everything quickly but never carelessly. "Yes, please." Darian held up the poster, examining his work. He'd printed the photo from their home computer, the one where his mother crossed the finish line in London, arms raised, face transformed by victory. The image was slightly pixelated, but clear enough, real enough. Lanessa plated the eggs and set them down, then leaned over his shoulder. Her hand rested there, warm and steady. "That's good work. You got the year right, the event, everything." Ms. Patterson said we had to include something that made our family special. Darian took a bite, talking around the food until his mother gave him that look. He swallowed. "I wanted to do you." "I'm honored." She sat across from him with her own plate and a travel mug of coffee. Her phone buzzed on the table, her patient schedule lighting up the screen. Back-to-back appointments until 3, then the speaking engagement at the university sports department at 5. She'd miss his practice again. The guilt flickered across her face before she could hide it. "It's okay, Mom. I know you're busy." "Doesn't make it okay." She sipped her coffee, studying him with those eyes that always seemed to see more than he said. "Some of the kids at practice, they might not believe this. You know that, right?" Darian shrugged, but something tightened in his chest. "Why wouldn't they?" "Because people have ideas about what Olympic athletes look like, where they live, what they drive." She glanced toward the window where their 2008 Honda Civic sat in the parking lot, the one with the dent in the passenger door they couldn't afford to fix. "They think gold medals come with mansions and fancy cars. They don't understand that most of us come back to regular life, regular jobs, regular neighborhoods." "But you have the medal. It's real." "It is real." Lanessa stood and walked to the small closet by the front door. She knelt, working the combination on the safe they kept on the floor behind the winter coats. The lock clicked open. When she returned to the table, she carried it in both hands like it was made of something more fragile than metal. The gold caught the morning light, throwing small reflections across the ceiling. Darian had seen it before, but never casually. His mother didn't take it out for show. She took it out to remember, to verify, to teach. "London 2012, she read from the engraving, her finger tracing the words. "Women's 400 meters. This happened. I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life, and it was enough." She set it on the table between them, next to his poster. "Check your facts. Make sure you got everything right." Darian compared the medal to his drawing, adjusting a detail in the ribbon design. The weight of it, even just sitting there, felt significant, proof made solid. "Why don't you wear it?" The question came out before he could stop it. "Or put it on the wall. Everybody would know then." Lanessa was quiet for a moment, turning the medal over in her hands. "Real achievement doesn't need an audience, baby. It just is." She looked at him directly. I know what I did. You know what I did. That's enough. I don't need strangers to validate something I lived through, and I don't need to perform my accomplishments to prove they're real. She placed the medal back in his hands, let him feel the weight of it. But you're going to meet people who think that if you're not performing it, broadcasting it, displaying it, then it doesn't exist. People who think extraordinary only looks one way, lives in one kind of neighborhood, drives one kind of car. That's stupid. That's bias. She took the medal back, held it up to the light one more time. And you're going to have to decide again and again whether you're going to shrink yourself to fit their expectations or stand in your truth even when it's uncomfortable. The medal went back in the safe. The lock clicked. His mother returned to the table and kissed the top of his head, her lips warm against his scalp. Stand in your truth, even when it's hard. Even when people don't believe you. Even when it costs you something. Because the truth doesn't change based on who accepts it. Okay, Mom. She grabbed her keys, her work bag, her travel mug. I love you. Kill it at practice. Love you too. The door closed behind her, and Darian was alone with his poster and the memory of the medal's weight. He finished his breakfast, cleaned his plate like she'd taught him, and carefully slid the poster into an oversized folder to protect it on the walk. Outside, the morning had warmed into something humid and heavy. Their neighborhood stretched out in rows of identical apartment buildings, cars that had seen better years, small patches of grass that the complex barely maintained. Kids played in the parking lot. Someone's music drifted from an open window. Regular life, regular neighborhood. Darian walked the 6 blocks to the community center with his poster under his arm, passing the corner store where Mr. Chen always gave him a piece of candy, the bus stop where his mother caught the number 47 to work, the chain-link fence surrounding the elementary school he'd graduated from last year. His mother's words echoed with each step. Stand in your truth, even when it's hard. He reached the community center, the building squat and practical with its brick exterior and small windows. The gym entrance was around back, the door propped open to let in air. Inside, he could hear the familiar sounds of basketball practice preparing to start. Sneakers squeaking, voices echoing, Coach Brennan's whistle. Darian took a breath, adjusted his grip on the poster, and walked through the door into the bright fluorescent light of the gymnasium. His truth was on that poster board, carefully researched and honestly presented. His mother had won Olympic gold. That was a fact. He had no reason to think anyone would question it. Darian sat on the bench outside Patricia Voss's office, the torn pieces of his poster board balanced across his lap. His hands still held fragments. Part of his mother's face from the London ceremony photo, a corner with the Olympic rings, a section of the timeline he'd worked on for 3 days. The paper edges were sharp and uneven where Coach Brennan had ripped through the center. The hallway was narrow and institutional, painted that particular shade of beige that community centers and public schools favored. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Through the wall, he could hear the muffled sound of practice continuing without him. Whistles, squeaking shoes, the thud of basketballs against hardwood. Coach Brennan emerged from the gym, his face still flushed from the confrontation. He walked past Darian without looking at him, knocked twice on Patricia's door, and entered when she called out. Darian couldn't hear the specific words, but he could hear the tone. Coach Brennan's voice carried that particular quality adults used when they were being reasonable, when they were explaining something they considered obvious. Patient but firm, disappointed but not surprised. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then Patricia's door opened and Coach Brennan stepped out. His expression settled into something like vindication. "She'll call you in," he said, finally making eye contact with Darian. "Tell her the truth this time." Darian didn't respond. He gathered the torn pieces carefully, holding them against his chest like they still mattered, like they were still proof of something real. "Darian?" Patricia's voice came from inside the office. "Come on in, please." The office was small and organized, everything labeled and filed. Patricia sat behind her desk with a yellow legal pad in front of her, a pen already in hand. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down. Let's talk about what happened." Darian sat, still holding the torn poster pieces. He placed them carefully on the edge of her desk. Patricia looked at the fragments, then at him. Her expression wasn't unkind, exactly. Just, tired and administrative. Like this was one more problem in a long day of problems. Coach Brennan tells me you made up a story about your mother being an Olympic athlete. He says when he questioned it, you became defensive and disrespectful to the program. I didn't lie. Darian's voice was steady. That's my mom. She won gold in the 4x100-meter relay in London, 2012. She ran the third leg. Patricia wrote something on her legal pad. Darian, I need you to understand that we take honesty very seriously here. This program is built on integrity and respect. When kids fabricate stories for attention, I didn't fabricate anything. Then why doesn't your mother come to games? Patricia's pen hovered over the paper. Coach Brennan says he's never seen her at a single practice or game this entire season. She works. Darian felt something tight in his chest. She's a physical therapist at the rehabilitation clinic on Marshall Street. She works late most days, and sometimes she has speaking engagements on weekends. Speaking engagements about what? About being an Olympic athlete, about overcoming adversity, about what it takes to compete at that level. Patricia's expression shifted, not quite skeptical, but close. That look adults got when they'd already decided what was true and were just going through the motions of listening. I see. She picked up her desk phone. What's your mother's number? Let's call her right now and clear this up. Darian recited the number. He knew it by heart, had known it since he was 6 years old, and she'd made him memorize it for emergencies. Patricia dialed, put the phone on speaker. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then clicked over to voicemail. Linessa's voice, warm and professional. You've reached Darian Hughes. I'm unable to take your call right now, but please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Patricia ended the call before the beep. She wrote something else on her legal pad. She's with a patient, Darian said. She can't answer during sessions. She'll call back. Darian. Patricia set down her pen and folded her hands on the desk. Do you have any proof, any evidence that what you're saying is true? The medal's at home, in the safe, and her Team USA jacket, and all her photos from London. But you don't have anything with you right now. I had the poster, with pictures and everything. Coach Brennan tore it up. Patricia glanced at the fragments on her desk, then back at Darian. Her expression had settled into something administrative and final. Here's what I think is happening. I think you probably believe what you're saying. Maybe your mother told you stories about the Olympics, or maybe you saw something on TV and you got confused about what was real. Kids do that sometimes. They mix up what they wish was true with what actually happened. I'm not confused. Darian's hands tightened on the armrests. I'm telling the truth. I'm sure you believe that. Patricia's voice had that particular gentleness adults used when they'd decided you were wrong, but wanted to seem compassionate about it. But I have to trust Coach Brennan's judgment here. He's been with this program for 8 years. He's worked with hundreds of kids. He knows when someone is being honest and when they're embellishing for attention. The word hung in the air. Embellishing. Like his mother's gold medal was just a story he'd made bigger in his head. I'm going to suspend you from practice for 1 week, Patricia continued. Before you can return, I need to have a meeting with your mother, in person, to discuss your behavior and your difficulty with truthfulness. I'm not lying. The suspension starts today. Patricia pulled a pre-printed form from her desk drawer and began filling it out. You're dismissed from the building. When your mother is available, have her call me to schedule the parent meeting. Darian stood. He gathered the torn pieces of his poster carefully, holding them against his chest. I didn't lie, he said one more time. Patricia didn't look up from the form she was completing. You can go, Darian. He walked out of her office, through the narrow beige hallway, past the bulletin board advertising summer programs and team photos from previous seasons. Behind him, through the gym doors, practice continued, his teammates running drills, Coach Brennan's whistle cutting through the air. The front entrance was on the opposite side of the building from the gym. Darian pushed through the double doors into the late afternoon heat, the suspension notice folded in his pocket, the torn pieces of his mother's achievement pressed against his chest. Behind him, the doors swung shut. Through the glass, he could see his teammates filing out of the gym for water break, their faces turned away, their eyes avoiding the place where he stood alone on the sidewalk with the truth. Nobody believed. The cafeteria smelled like industrial pizza and disinfectant. Darian walked past the usual table, the one he'd shared with Terrence since 3rd grade, and saw his best friend's eyes flick toward him, then away, like looking at something that hurt. Terrence was sitting with Marcus and Jamal from the team. There was an empty seat. There was always an empty seat at that table for Darian. Not today. He kept walking, tray balanced in his hands, and found a spot at the end of a table where 6th graders were arguing about a video game. They didn't notice him. That was fine. Being invisible was better than being the joke. "That's him." The voice came from behind, loud enough to be heard, but quiet enough to pretend it wasn't meant to carry. "That's the kid who said his mom won Olympic gold." Laughter rippled through the cafeteria like a wave. Darian ate his pizza. It tasted like cardboard. Between 5th and 6th period, a girl from his English class stopped him in the hallway. Brittany something. She had braces and always raised her hand first. "Why'd you make up something so crazy?" She wasn't being mean exactly, just curious, like he was a science experiment. "Olympic gold medalist? You could have said she was a teacher or a nurse or something normal." "She is a gold medalist." His voice came out smaller than he wanted. Brittany's face twisted into something between pity and embarrassment. "Okay, sure." She walked away quickly, like lies might be contagious. In the bathroom before last period, Darian pulled out his phone. His hands shook as he typed. "Coach tore up my project, said I was lying. Everyone thinks I made it up." He watched the screen. 1 minute, 2 minutes, the reply came back. "In session, baby. We'll clear this up. Truth always comes out." 3 words that were supposed to be enough. He stared at his phone until the screen went dark. That evening, Lanessa came home at 7:30, still in her scrubs, her work bag heavy on her shoulder. She kicked off her shoes by the door and found Darian at the kitchen table, the torn pieces of his poster spread out like a puzzle with missing pieces. "What happened?" She was next to him in 3 steps, her hand on his shoulder. He told her. Everything. Coach Brennan's laugh, the tearing sound, the athletic director's office, the suspension notice, the way Terrence looked at him in the cafeteria. Lanessa's jaw tightened. Her fingers curled into fists, then slowly released. "Show me the suspension form." He handed it to her. She read it twice, her lips moving slightly, the way they did when she was forcing herself to stay calm. "I'm going to that meeting." Her voice was quiet, controlled, the way it got when she was truly angry. "And I'm bringing everything. My credentials, my medal, photos, documentation, everything." "They won't believe you either." The words came out hollow. "They think we're lying." She turned his face toward hers, her hands gentle on his cheeks. "Baby, I've stood on a podium in front of the entire world. I've had my national anthem played while wearing my country's flag. Some basketball coach in a community center gym doesn't get to decide what's true about my life or yours." She pulled out her phone and dialed. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Ms. Voss, this is Lanessa Hughes, Darian's mother. I'm calling regarding the suspension notice and the parent meeting request. I'd like to clarify that I am indeed a 2012 Olympic gold medalist in the 4x100-meter relay. I have documentation, credentials, and the medal itself. I'm available tomorrow after 3 or Thursday any time. My direct number is on file. I look forward to resolving this situation." She hung up and looked at Darian. "Truth always comes out, baby. Always." In her office the next morning, Patricia Voss listened to the voicemail twice. The woman sounded professional, educated, calm. She also sounded like every parent who'd ever called to defend a child caught in a lie. Anyone could claim credentials over the phone. Patricia made a note to call back but marked it low priority. She had budget reports due and a plumbing issue in the women's locker room. Thursday afternoon, Darian stood outside the gym during practice, suspended from participation, allowed to observe. He could hear everything through the double doors, the squeak of sneakers on polished wood, the rhythm of dribbling. Coach Brennan's voice cutting through it all. "Hustle, hustle, we build character here. We build men of integrity." Darian pushed through the doors and climbed to the 3rd row of bleachers. The metal was cold through his jeans. Coach Brennan blew his whistle. Practice stopped. "Some people will say anything for attention." The coach's voice echoed off the walls. He wasn't looking at Darian, but everyone else was. "They'll make up stories, invent achievements, claim connections to greatness they don't have. That's not what we build here. We build truth. We build character. We build real men who understand that lies have consequences. Terrence was standing near the free throw line. His eyes found Darian's for just a second. Then he looked away. Coach Brennan clapped his hands. "Run it again. Full court press." The team moved. The gym filled with noise and motion. Darian sat alone in the bleachers, the only person not moving, not belonging, not believed. Coach Brennan gathered the team at center court as practice wound down. Parent game day is Saturday, 2 days. Everyone's family will be there to see what real integrity looks like, what real achievement looks like, what real character looks like. His eyes found Darian in the stands. Everyone who belongs here will be there. The gymnasium smelled like floor polish and anticipation. Families clustered in the bleachers, their voices creating a warm buzz that bounced off the painted concrete walls. Kids in matching jerseys darted between adults, showing off layups, calling out to siblings. Mothers adjusted their sons' headbands. Fathers demonstrated pivot footwork. Grandparents saved seats with coats and purses. Darian sat alone on the bottom bleacher, his phone face up on his knee. The screen lit up. His chest loosened slightly. "Emergency Olympic Committee thing. Called in last minute for youth sports panel. We'll be there by 3 p.m. I promise. Love you." He checked the clock above the scorer's table. 2:17 p.m. 43 minutes. Around him, the gym pulsed with belonging. Marcus stood between his parents, both wearing his jersey number on custom T-shirts. Jamal's grandmother was setting up a camera on a tripod. Terrence's dad was talking to Coach Brennan near the bench, both men laughing, easy with each other. Coach Brennan's eyes swept the crowd. They landed on Darian. The coach's expression shifted. Something hardened behind his eyes. Darian looked back at his phone. 2:19 p.m., 41 minutes. Coach Brennan walked to center court. He raised his whistle but didn't blow it. The sharp gesture was enough. Conversations died. Kids stopped shooting around. The gym fell into expectant silence. "Thank you all for coming to our parent game day." Coach Brennan's voice carried easily. He was good at commanding a room. "Before we start our scrimmages and family recognition, I want to take a moment for something important, something about integrity." Darian's stomach dropped. "We've been dealing with a situation this week, a teaching moment, really." Coach Brennan clasped his hands behind his back. "It's about honesty, about the values we instill in these young men." Parents leaned forward. Kids glanced at each other. "Darian Hughes, come here, please." The words hit like a slap. Darian's legs felt disconnected from his body as he stood. The walk to center court stretched impossibly long. 60-plus faces tracked his movement. His sneakers squeaked on the hardwood. The sound was too loud. He stopped 3 feet from Coach Brennan. The coach was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Darian told his teammates that his mother is an Olympic gold medalist. Coach Brennan addressed the crowd, not Darian. He created an entire family tree project about it, said she won the 400 meters in London 2012. Some parents nodded, expressions neutral, waiting for context. The problem is, she's never here. Not once this entire season, not for a single game or practice. Coach Brennan's voice took on a patient, reasonable tone. And when we asked him to prove it, he couldn't. When we gave him chances to tell the truth, he doubled down on the story. Murmurs rippled through the bleachers. A woman whispered something to her husband. Another parent shook her head slowly. Darian felt heat crawling up his neck. "Son." Coach Brennan finally looked at him. "I'm giving you one chance, right here, right now, in front of your teammates and their families. Apologize for making this up, admit you lied for attention, and we move forward. You play today. You stay on the team." The silence in the gym was suffocating. "Or," Coach Brennan continued, "you're benched for the entire season. Your choice." Darian could hear his own heartbeat. Every eye in the building pressed against him. Parents waited. Teammates stared. The clock above the scorer's table seemed frozen. His voice came out quieter than he wanted, but steady. "I didn't lie." Someone in the bleachers inhaled sharply. "My mom won gold in the 400 meters in London 2012. Her name is Lanessa Hughes. You can look it up right now on your phones. You can Google it. It's true." Coach Brennan's face reddened. "I've given you every chance, every opportunity to do the right thing. You've chosen dishonesty over accountability." He turned to the crowd. This is what happens when we let lies go unchallenged, when we don't hold young people to standards of truth. Coach. Terrence stood up from the bleachers, his voice uncertain. Maybe we should just— Sit down, Terrence. Coach Brennan's words cracked like a whip. Unless you want to join him. Terrence sat. The gym was so quiet Darian could hear the ventilation system humming overhead. You're done. Coach Brennan pointed toward the locker room. Collect your— The gym door opened. The sound of it echoed, metal against metal, footsteps on tile. Everyone turned. A woman stood in the doorway, black, early 30s, wearing dark slacks and a blazer over a professional blouse. She carried a Team USA jacket over one arm. Her natural hair was styled in a neat updo. Around her neck, catching the fluorescent lights and throwing back gold fire, hung an Olympic medal. She walked into the gym. Her heels clicked against the hardwood with absolute certainty. Each step measured, purposeful. Darian's throat closed. Darian Hughes crossed the floor toward center court. She didn't hurry, didn't run, just walked with the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing to prove but was about to prove everything anyway. The medal swung slightly with each step. London 2012, the Olympic rings, the ribbon in Team USA colors. She stopped beside her son. Coach Brennan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Linessa looked at Darian first. Her eyes were warm, concerned. She touched his shoulder gently. Then she turned to face Coach Brennan. I believe, she said quietly, you wanted proof. The gym door opened. The sound cut through everything, metal against metal, the click of the latch echoing in the sudden silence. Everyone turned. A woman stood in the doorway, black, early 30s, wearing dark slacks and a blazer over a crisp white blouse. She carried a Team USA jacket folded over one arm. Her natural hair was styled in a professional updo, the kind worn for important meetings. Around her neck hung an Olympic medal. The gold caught the fluorescent lights and threw it back, unmistakable and brilliant. The ribbon in red, white, and blue. The Olympic rings. London 2012 stamped into metal that had been touched by fewer than 1,000 people in human history. Darian Hughes walked into the gym. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, each step measured, certain. The sound echoed in the silence like a heartbeat. No one moved. No one spoke. Parents on the bleachers leaned forward. Kids on the bench stood up. The referee held the ball against his hip, frozen mid-motion. Linessa crossed the court. She didn't hurry, didn't run, just walked with the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing left to prove but was about to prove everything anyway. The medal swung slightly with each step, the weight of it visible, real. She reached Darian. He looked up at her, his eyes wide and wet. Linessa placed her hand on his shoulder, warm and solid. Sorry I'm late, baby. Her voice carried in the silence, soft but clear. Coach Brennan's face drained of color. The red flush that had been there seconds before vanished, leaving him pale and slack-jawed. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. At the scorer's table, Patricia Voss went white. Her clipboard slipped from her fingers and clattered against the floor. Linessa turned to face Coach Brennan. Her expression was calm, measured, the kind of composure that came from standing on a track in front of 80,000 people and the entire world watching through cameras. I'm Darian Hughes, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled every corner of the gym. I won gold in the 400 meters at the 2012 London Olympics. The medal gleamed against her blazer. I work as a physical therapist at Riverside Rehabilitation Center. I drive a 2009 Honda Civic because it's reliable and paid off. I live in a small apartment because it's what I can afford while saving for my son's education. She paused. Let the words settle. And I'm not always at games because I work 45 hours a week and occasionally speak to young athletes about my experience. I was at an Olympic Committee event this afternoon. That's why I'm wearing this. She touched the medal briefly. The gesture was simple, factual. My son told you the truth. Another pause. Longer this time. And you punished him for it. The silence that followed was different now, heavier, thick with realization and shame, movement in the bleachers, parents pulling out phones, some typing frantically into search bars, others raising cameras, recording. A mother in the third row gasped, "Oh my God!" A father next to her leaned over to look at her screen. His eyes went wide. That's really her. Darian Hughes, 400 meters, London 2012, someone read aloud. Gold medal, American record. It's all online, her photo, everything. The murmurs spread through the crowd like wildfire. Phones glowing, screens turning toward neighbors, confirmation spreading from person to person. Coach Brennan stammered. I thought... His face had gone from pale to gray. Sweat beaded at his temples. You thought what? Darian's question was gentle, almost kind, but it cut deeper than any shout could have. That Olympic athletes look a certain way, live a certain way? She took one step closer, not threatening, just present. That we can't be black single mothers working regular jobs? That we all have endorsement deals and mansions? That if someone is extraordinary, you'd be able to tell just by looking at them? Coach Brennan's mouth worked silently. His hands hung at his sides, useless. That a child from a modest neighborhood couldn't possibly have an Olympic champion for a mother? The questions hung in the air. No one had answers. Patricia Voss stood frozen by the scorer's table, her face a mask of horror as she realized what she'd enabled. Terrence sat on the bench, tears streaming down his face, his hands covering his mouth. Parents in the stands looked at each other, then away. Uncomfortable, complicit in their silence. Darian's hand stayed on Darian's shoulder, steady, grounding. My son stood here alone and told you the truth, over and over. He didn't embellish, didn't perform, just stated a fact about his family. She looked around the gym, at the parents, at Patricia, at the kids on the bench. And every single one of you decided it was easier to believe he was lying than to believe he could be telling the truth. The weight of that statement settled over the room like snow. Coach Brennan's breathing was audible now, ragged. His eyes were red-rimmed. The gym lights hummed overhead. Someone's phone buzzed. A kid shifted on the bleachers, the wood creaking. All eyes turned to Coach Brennan, waiting. The man who had demanded accountability, who had torn up a child's project, who had threatened punishment for refusing to lie. The man who now had to answer for being catastrophically, publicly, undeniably wrong. Patricia Voss stepped forward, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Her voice carried that administrative smoothness, the tone of someone trying to regain control of a situation that had already slipped through her fingers. Miss Hughes, if we'd known, we would have... Darian turned her head slowly. The movement was economical, precise. Her eyes locked onto Patricia's, and the athletic director's words died mid-sentence. You could have known. Darian's voice was quiet, conversational, which somehow made it cut deeper. You could have believed him. You could have done a simple internet search before you backed a man who tore up a child's project. Patricia's mouth opened, closed. The clipboard lowered slightly. Her face had gone pale, the kind of bloodless white that comes from realizing you've been complicit in something you can't take back. No words came. What could she say? That she'd been too busy? That it wasn't her job to fact-check a coach's judgment? That she'd trusted Derek's assessment because it was easier than investigating? The silence stretched. Patricia looked down at her clipboard. At the gym floor. Anywhere but at Darian. Darian turned away from her, dismissing her without another word, because Patricia wasn't the point. Not really. She faced Coach Brennan directly. The man looked smaller now, his shoulders hunched inward. His face was blotchy, red creeping up from his collar. His hands hung at his sides, fingers twitching like they wanted to do something but didn't know what. You tore up my son's project. Darian's voice remained level, measured. You called him a liar in front of his peers. You tried to force him to apologize for telling the truth. She paused. Why? Coach Brennan's breath came out shaky. His eyes darted to Darian, then back to Darian. He swallowed hard. I thought I was teaching integrity. I thought... His voice cracked. The sentence hung unfinished in the air between them. He couldn't complete it, because finishing it meant saying the quiet part out loud, admitting what he'd assumed, why he'd been so certain. You thought he was lying because of how we look. Darian didn't make it a question. Where we live. What you assume we can't be. The gym was so quiet that the hum of the fluorescent lights became deafening. Someone in the bleachers shifted, and the wood creaked like a gunshot. Coach Brennan's eyes filled. Not performance tears, not the kind you manufacture to escape consequences, real ones, the kind that come when you see yourself clearly for the first time and don't like what's looking back. You're right. His voice broke completely. I'm so sorry. Darian, I'm so sorry. He looked at the boy. Really looked at him. At the kid who'd stood alone and refused to lie even when everyone wanted him to. The kid whose project he'd destroyed with his own hands. I'm sorry, he said again. The words came out raw, painful, like they were scraping his throat on the way out. Darian stood very still. His mother's hand rested on his shoulder. He didn't speak. Linessa watched Coach Brennan for a long moment, weighing something. Then she asked the question that mattered. Sorry is a starting point. What are you going to do differently? Coach Brennan's face crumpled. I don't know. I didn't think I was biased, Linessa finished for him. None of us think we are. That's the problem. She turned slowly, addressing the entire gym. Parents in the stands, kids on the benches, Patricia still frozen by the scorer's table. How many of you believed my son was lying because you couldn't imagine his truth? Her voice carried to every corner. Be honest. The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. A few parents looked at each other. Some stared at their hands. One mother nodded slowly. Then another. A father in the back cleared his throat, his expression ashamed. No one spoke, but the acknowledgement was there, visible in their faces, in their inability to meet Darian's eyes. Linessa knelt down. The medal swung forward, catching the light. She put both hands on Darian's shoulders, bringing herself to his level. You stood in your truth, she said softly. Just to him, though everyone heard it. I'm proud of you. Darian's face finally broke. The tears he'd been holding back for days spilled over. His voice came out small and broken. I just wanted them to believe me. Linessa pulled him close, let him cry into her shoulder. The Team USA jacket crinkled between them, the medal pressed against his chest. After a moment, she stood, turned back to Coach Brennan. The man was still standing there, tears on his own face, looking devastated. He's 11. Linessa's voice was quiet but absolute. He needed you to believe him. Do better. Coach Brennan nodded. The movement was jerky, desperate, like he was trying to physically absorb the weight of what he'd done, what he needed to become. I will, he whispered. I will. Movement from the side. Terrence stepped forward, his face wet with tears. He walked straight to Darian. Darian, I'm sorry. His voice shook. I should have stood with you. I knew you weren't lying, and I'm sorry. Darian wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, looked at his best friend, the kid who'd chosen safety over loyalty, who'd let him stand alone. He nodded. Once, accepting it, not forgetting, but accepting. Patricia found her voice again. It came out smaller than before, less administrative, more human. Ms. Hughes, She stopped. Started again. The community center will be implementing immediate changes, bias training for all staff, new protocols for how we handle situations like this. She paused. Would you be willing to speak to our staff and families about assumptions, about what we got wrong? Linessa looked at Patricia, at Coach Brennan, at all the faces in the gym, people who'd learned something today, whether they wanted to or not. 3 months later, the community center hallway looked different. Photos lined the walls now, faces of all colors, athletes, scientists, artists, people who'd achieved extraordinary things while living ordinary lives. Linessa's Olympic photo hung near the main gym entrance, her younger self frozen mid-stride, arms raised, gold medal around her neck, a small plaque underneath. Linessa Hughes, 2012 London Olympics, 400 meters, gold medalist, physical therapist, parent, community member. Inside the gym, practice was underway. Coach Brennan stood on the sideline, whistle around his neck, watching a new kid run drills. Marcus, 10 years old, fast, really fast. My dad played college ball, Marcus had said during introductions. He could have gone pro, but he got injured. The old Coach Brennan would have nodded politely, maybe raised an eyebrow. College ball. Sure, kid. Everyone's dad almost went pro. The new Coach Brennan paused, caught himself in the assumption, felt the weight of what he'd almost done. Yeah, what school? He asked instead. Georgetown. He's got his jersey framed at home. That's incredible. I'd love to hear more about that sometime. Maybe he could come talk to the team about handling setbacks. Marcus's face lit up. Really? He'd love that. Coach Brennan made a note on his clipboard, followed up instead of dismissed, verified instead of assumed. It was harder this way, required more work, more humility, but he'd earned harder. Across the gym, Patricia Voss was setting up chairs for the evening session, mandatory bias training, third one this quarter, guest speakers rotated through. Last month, a Latina engineer. Tonight, a black surgeon. Next week, a white single father who was also a published poet. People whose lives didn't fit the narrow boxes others tried to put them in. Patricia had fought the training at first. Budget concerns, scheduling conflicts, the usual administrative resistance to change. Then she'd watched the video someone recorded, saw herself standing there while a child was destroyed, heard her own voice saying it was just a misunderstanding. She hadn't slept right since. Near the water fountain, Darian knelt beside a small girl. 8 years old, braids tied with purple ribbons. Her name was Zoe and she was crying. "They don't believe me," she said, voice hitching. "I told them my uncle's a neurosurgeon and Coach Williams said I was making it up. He said people like us don't have doctors in the family." Darian handed her a tissue, felt the echo of his own humiliation, the way it burned. "I believe you," he said quietly, just to her, though others could hear. "And we're going to figure out how to show them, not because you have to prove anything, but because they need to learn." Zoe looked up at him. "You're the kid with the Olympic mom." "Yeah." "Did it feel bad when they didn't believe you?" "Really bad, but I was telling the truth, and so are you. That's what matters." He helped her stand, walked her over to Patricia's office. They'd file a formal complaint, document it, make sure it didn't get swept away. Things were different now, harder to ignore. Terrence appeared at Darian's side after Zoe left with her mother. His presence was solid now, reliable. He'd spent 3 months proving that his apology meant something. "Coach Williams is an idiot," Terrence said. "Yeah. You want me to talk to Zoe's teammates? Make sure they're not giving her grief?" Darian nodded, grateful. This was what friendship looked like when it was real, when it cost something. They walked out together, past Linessa's photo, past all the faces that proved achievement wore every kind of skin, lived in every kind of neighborhood. Later, in the small apartment that still had worn furniture and peeling paint, Linessa made dinner in her scrubs, the blue ones with the clinic logo. She'd worked a full shift, helped 3 patients regain mobility, filled out insurance paperwork, ordinary work, extraordinary impact. Darian sat at the kitchen table, math homework spread out in front of him, the same table, the same chairs. Nothing had changed except everything had changed. "Coach asked if you'd come speak at the end of season ceremony," he said, not looking up from his fractions. Linessa stirred the pasta. "What do you think?" "I think people need to hear you." She smiled, set down the spoon, came to sit across from him. "You've been helping a lot of kids lately. Zoe's mom called me, said you were kind to her daughter. She was scared, like I was. You weren't just scared, you were brave." Darian finally looked up. "I had you." "You had yourself first. I just showed up at the end." The medal was back in the safe. The Team USA jacket hung in the closet. They didn't need them on display. The truth of who they were didn't require constant proof. They were enough. They'd always been enough. But here's what you need to understand, what you need to really hear. Darian's story isn't unique. Every single day, children are disbelieved because of what adults assume about them. Their race, their neighborhood, their family structure, the car their parents drive, the clothes they wear, the way they speak. 67% of black children report being disbelieved by teachers or coaches about their family achievements. 67%. That's not an anomaly. That's a system. Coach Brennan's assumptions were rooted in bias he didn't even know he had. Patricia's complicity came from convenience. The teammates' silence came from self-preservation. But what about you? What assumptions are you making right now? Whose truth are you dismissing? When someone tells you who they are, who they belong to, what they've achieved, do you believe them? Or do you wait for proof that fits your expectations? Do you believe the kid in hand-me-down clothes who says their parent is successful? Do you believe the girl from the poor neighborhood who says she's going to college? Do you believe the boy with the single mother who says he's loved and supported? Or do you need to see the medal first? 3 months after the worst day of his life, Darian stood in the gym surrounded by teammates who believed him. Wearing a jersey his mother finally got to watch him play in, he was still the same kid, quiet, observant, not the star, just himself. But now when he spoke, people listened. The question isn't what Darian did. The question is, what will you do?